Hey Fred, can you charge 200 walkies in your apartment tonight?
Copy you.
I want to start off by welcoming our guest today, Susan Nessanbaum-Goldberg, who is a producer, production executive, who's come to tell us and share her stories with us today. How you doing?
Good.
Yeah?
This should be fun.
It's going to be fun. Looking back at how it all began, what was the moment where you looked at this as a career worth pursuing?
So I went to Ithaca College in upstate New York.
Okay.
And it was one of the first schools that had a television and radio department. Of course, I wasn't in the television and radio department. I was in education, English, speech, and drama. That's what my degree is in, all four of them. Weird. But all my friends were in TVR. And so when I graduated, I went back to New Jersey. I worked at a youth services bureau as a teacher. I started a school for high school dropouts. We created the Lifers program, which Arnold Shapiro won an Academy Award for Scared Straight. I wasn't there when he shot it, but we started it. And then I went to get my master's because you can't keep a teaching certificate without a master's degree.
Okay.
And I studied television. And I got straight A's, no surprise. And I went to work at WBTB Blonder Television in Montclair, New Jersey, or maybe it was West Orange.
Okay.
And discovered I liked it. So when I got my degree, I went to St. John's University and ran their TV studio. Dealt with all the kids. The guy who ran the department was named Winston Kirby. He had been a senior vice president at CBS in marketing. He had no idea how to do shows. He was a great guy and started Sunrise Semester stuff for St. John's and CBS. So I got to CBS and realized this was something I could actually do. But I also knew I didn't want to do news and I didn't want to do reality. I wanted to do sitcoms. There were no sitcoms in New York. What do you do? So I sent out how I got to Hollywood is a different story, but I sent out 100 resumes, had 7 responses, got on a plane, stayed with a friend of mine, took the 7 interviews and went, this could be fun. And they laid me off at St. John's. I took my unemployment and moved to California. It was really fun. But a year before that, I have a friend who was an actress, and she was in the movie Grease.
Okay.
She invited me out to visit her. And my first day there, my friend from New Jersey picked me up at the airport in his yellow MG convertible. And we went through the pearly gates of Paramount and spent the afternoon watching all the dance numbers from Grease. And then that night we went to Randy Kleiser's house for a party where we danced together, all of us, including Olivia, including John and his sisters and the entire cast.
Wow.
And I turned around and went, I could do this for a living. This could be fun. Hence, the year later, here I came.
Nice.
I didn't have a job, but I came.
What was your first job?
I interned at a show it was a pilot called Getting There, for Barry Steinberg, who did all of the Perry Masons and I don't know if he did Matlock, I think he did Diagnosis Murder.
Okay.
He was the unit guy.
Okay.
And John Astin was directing. And it was really, really fun. And I realized this could really be a good career. So I got a job on a pilot at Warner Brothers. I don't even remember who the line producer was, but I knew that Rob Reiner was going to direct it. And we were at the Warner Brothers lot. But then they didn't shoot it. They pulled it back. And I had interviewed with a woman named Nancy Haas at Compact to work in their trucks division. There were no trucks. There were no videotape machines. There was nothing. That was one of the first companies to do that. And they hired me. So that's how I started.
Nice.
So in you ready?
Yeah.
79, I was hired by Compact to be I don't know if we were production managers or production coordinators, but we ran the trucks division. So we knew all the camera operators, all the audio guys. We knew all the technical people. We had 2 trucks, well, not 2. We had a box truck that held the 2-inch tape machines and the 1-inch tape machines. Uh-huh. And then we had a separate truck that held everything else. And you'd roll onto the lot, and you'd set everything up, and you'd videotape. Nobody did it. We were one of the first. Nice. So, like KTLA was the first to do remotes by satellite. Mm-hmm. We were the first to do videotape.
Oh, wow.
It was crazy.
Wow.
It was crazy. We
That's
did,
great.
and we were hired for everything.
Yeah.
I mean, Don Mischer died recently. We worked for him a lot.
Wow.
Michael Seligman, Nancy Henson. Who else? We were at the Playboy Mansion. We did the Academy Awards, the Emmys, the Grammys, and whatever Muppets did. All kinds of stuff.
Back then, in that early part of your career, before you started off, what was that like for you? What was that like?
It was fun.
Yeah? Why?
Why?
Yeah, tell me why.
Because you got to go everywhere and do everything. We went to the Playboy Mansion. Spent the day there shooting the Playmate of the Year.
1979?
79 or 80, yeah.
That would've
I
been-
stayed till about 80, I think.
That would have been my 9 or 10-year-old years. That wouldn't have been good for me.
Okay, don't start. And then we did Barbara Walters. We did all her interviews. She took us on a tour of Richard Pryor's house up in the
Oh,
valley,
wow.
showed us his shoe closet. He had more shoes than I do. It was surprising. In every color. He bought the same style in every color. We met Sylvester Stallone on a Barbara Walters shoe.
Oh, wow.
We did the first sitcoms on the Warner's lot, the first sitcoms on the Paramount lot. First sitcom on Warner Brothers was Alice with Linda Lavin. That was fun. That's where I met Mark Summers. He was doing Warm Up then.
Okay.
He became king of Food Network for a while.
Yeah.
Who else was there? Oh, we did a Paramount. We were hired to do a new show called Bosom Buddies.
Oh!
Peter Scolari and Tom Hanks.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That was one of my favorites growing up.
It's a great show.
Yeah.
And it was fun to do.
Oh.
We
be
did Monty
amazing to do.
Python at the Hollywood Bowl.
Oh, that's the best Monty Python.
And I got to go for free.
That's
was
the
the
greatest.
best.
That's the greatest Monty Python.
Yeah. So we did
show.
we did a lot of stuff.
Those are some of my favorite things.
We
that I
were the
ever
first
watched.
people to send a crew to China with Bob Hope and Big Bird.
And why were those two chosen?
Well, Bob Hope was chosen because NBC wanted to, and he was doing several specials a year.
Yeah.
And then he used to do the USO tours, so he
Yeah.
was the logical person. And of course, everybody knew Big Bird.
Of course, he's the logical second
And
choice.
Carol Spinney went.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, that was fun. I wasn't allowed to go. I had to stay home.
Oh, you just
Yeah.
manage from afar.
So I tried to call Will Oborn, who was the production manager for NBC, and you had to go through Taiwan because they spoke English, and then they'd call the Chinese operators. It took about an hour, and then I said, I need to speak to Will Oborn. He's in such and such a hotel in Peking, because it wasn't Beijing yet.
Mm-hmm.
And about half an hour or so later, he answers the phone. I said, where are you? Are you at the hotel? He said, no, we're at the Great Wall. They're following us everywhere. They have us under surveillance every minute of every day.
Oh, yeah.
Well, of course. And everybody came home with dysentery. That was fun. So,
What was the favorite part of your job back then? What was the favorite part of that?
watching everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
We went to interview Elton John in Elton John's house right off of Benedict Canyon.
What was that like?
Crazy. I stayed in the background. I just watched, but he did about 2 hours. It was really fun. It was just fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you look back over that time, what's the one that stands out as your most amazing moment, or who you got to meet?
Well, I didn't get to meet Streisand because they wouldn't let anybody in except the crew, so that was upsetting. They shot at her house. She did a concert at her house at that time. I don't know if there's anything specific. It was just really fun to do.
Yeah.
And Nancy, who was my coworker and brought me up, everything we did was happening all at once. Everything. And we had 6 jobs booked every week or more. We were just busy. And it was fun. It was just crazy. And we met everybody because everybody wanted to use the company.
Mm-hmm.
We were the first. And we knew what we were doing. Plus, we had the editing base across. It was compact editing and compact video. And so when you finished shooting, everything went across the way. So it was all in one house. You don't have that anymore.
No.
So it was good.
Nice. You went from associate producer roles and all that, all the way up to the VP of production at Sony Television Pictures.
Sony, it used to be Columbia Pictures Television, then it became Sony Television.
What was that journey like, going all the way from associate producer to now being a production executive at a VP level at a company that size?
Well, what's interesting is there were a lot of lateral moves. Everybody thinks you just go forward, you just go forward. You don't. Sometimes you go backwards. Sometimes you go sideways. Sometimes you go up. Sometimes you go back again. So after I left Compact, I followed Nancy to Games People Play that Don Ohlmeyer was shooting for NBC. I think it was NBC then. And we were all over the country. It was like the circus came to town. You'd go to a small town in Illinois for the cherry pit spitting contests, and you'd roll in like the circus. And in those days, nobody knew what the entertainment industry was really like, so they just let us in. And they gave us everything, which never happens now. And that was really fun. I think I was a coordinator on that one. I don't even remember my titles. Who knows? I became an associate producer at some point, I think when I was working with Vin DeBona with Pierre Cossette on some pilot called Soap Talk, which later became a show on the Soap Talk network for somebody else. It was like a 10 or 15 year gap in between. But then I went back to being a coordinator. At one point I was an assistant coordinator on Different World in its second season.
Oh, wow.
The first year that Debbie Allen directed.
Yeah.
It was a little crazy.
Yeah.
She had 200 extras on the
For
show.
a sitcom.
Yeah, because she wanted to populate the campus. It was shot at a school. They're going to redo it this year.
What was it like to spend a night in the world's most notorious prison, Alcatraz?
6 nights.
6 nights?
6 nights.
How was that?
We were shooting David Copperfield Escapes from Alcatraz. I signed an NDA. I cannot reveal any of the tricks.
No, that's fine.
Howard Malley, who is no longer with us, was the producer and asked me if I wanted a production manager. And I said yes. And I had just given birth to my first kid, like 10 months earlier. And I wasn't sure I was ready to leave, but I went. And it was fascinating. We arranged a barge to take the equipment to Alcatraz. There was no pier. It wasn't as populated during the day because it's a national park.
Yep.
You can't shoot during the day there. You can only shoot at night. So the barge came. Trucks were loaded onto the barge. Barge gets out to Alcatraz. There's a crane on the barge because there's no dock, really. And crane comes, picks up the videotape truck. On next one, I think there were 4 of them. And the golf carts, everything by crane.
Nice.
Onto Alcatraz. So they had to hide it during the day so people wouldn't get to it. We shot 5 nights, 1 prep. And it got to the point where we used to sit out in front of the prison and look at the view, because the view from Alcatraz at night is one of the most beautiful views of San Francisco you will ever see.
Oh, wow.
It was stunning. But prisoners couldn't see it. That was kind of the thing. The water was really cold. And we had our dinners in the laundry room, which supposedly was the most violent place on Alcatraz. They put us into isolation once to see what it was like. Pitch black. Can't see anything. No windows. No nothing. It was amazing. But it was fun.
Nice.
It was fun. And cold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it the coldest summer I ever? No, the coldest winter I ever spent was a summer in San Francisco.
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah. It was fun to do. It was fun to watch. I stayed away from the production itself. Mm-hmm. Because there were too many things going on. You know, he was doing his tricks and they were manipulating whatever they had to manipulate. And the camera operators, I think it was Dave Levison and Hector Ramirez. Hector's no longer with us. Dave and Hector are really tight, and they were 2 of the best I'd ever worked with.
Nice.
So
Nice. What was the most surprising challenge that you've ever had to solve on a production?
I don't think there was anything so big that it was insurmountable, quite honestly. I mean, I got very lucky. I always hired good staff, because the rule is you hire somebody who knows as much or more than you do, so that they help you solve the problems, not create more. I don't think there was anything that was so difficult ever. Sometimes you'd pull out your hair. We were doing something for Don Ohlmeyer. It was a series of specials, and we were shooting Lana Turner killing her boyfriend. And they were shooting inside a house in West Hollywood, and we were sitting outside in the rain. And then I went home a week later, and somebody said, "Oh, you work in such a glamorous business." And I said, "Yeah, you be wet at 3 o'clock in the morning, sitting in a chair waiting for the shot to go through."
What's something that you wish people understood more about a production executive or a VP of production?
That we actually work. A lot of times people think that when you hit that status or you're in that kind of situation, you come in at 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, you go home at 6. No. You're still working 7 days a week. You're still overseeing stuff. You're still dealing with issues. And you're still trying to make things work for the budgets and the time. Everybody thinks what we do is, whether you're an executive or whether you're a producer, and you know this yourself, everybody thinks we can just snap our fingers and make it better. Right?
Yes. No, I absolutely.
And they don't realize that it's only really about money and time. The creative process can be shifted to fit the money and time if the creative people are willing to do it. So
that's where that compromise comes in.
Yeah.
Yeah. The production, I think I was talking about it with somebody else, the production triangle.
Yep.
Yeah. And
cheap, good, or fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I keep trying to tell everybody that I'm convinced I can get all three, yet I still can't figure it out. But I can't
Nobody's
prove it.
figured
Yeah.
that one out.
Yeah, it's just like, it's like a wormhole. It's like I can't prove it, but I'm pretty sure
It is a wormhole. But truthfully, I mean, you always have plan A to plan Z. And it doesn't matter where you are. Or what position you're in, or what department you're in. You're still dealing with the same issues.
Yeah.
It's always money and time.
Yeah. And what qualities does a good producer have? And do producers today carry those skills?
Most of them. Listen, I've gone in for jobs. The people who were going to hire me were number 2 or 3 or 3 or 4 on the totem pole, wanted me, and they wouldn't take me because the executive producer wanted his friend. Which and the people who I knew were PAs when I first hired them. But I find it interesting. The qualities have never really changed. They're always the same. You have to be sharp. You have to know your budget really, really well. You have to know where you can pull from. You have to know the people you hire really, really well. And you have to trust them. And I think today most of those qualities are still there. And again, you hire somebody who knows in their department especially more than you do. I never like to be the middle person in a conversation between like a director and a cinematographer, or an executive producer and an art director. I want to stand back and say, well, what do you think? And let them talk it out, because I can't make that decision at the end of the day.
Exactly.
I can only advise it. So if you hire the right people, you're fine. But I don't think the qualities shifted. I think the qualities are still there. I just think some of the people are getting hired earlier than they, with the titles, maybe a little earlier than they should.
If you could time travel back to any one specific day you've ever had on set, which one would it be and why?
We Are the World, 1985.
So, yeah, tell me about that.
So Howard Malley.
Wait, you just throwing that out like that's just that's like the greatest thing ever.
Howard Malley, who I had done Copperfield for, Ken Cragen called him to produce it. And he said, you're not getting any money for it, it's for free because it's a charity. And I went, okay, who's coming? So he listed a few people, and I was like, okay. He said, Springsteen will be there. I said, I'm in, because I'm a Jersey girl. You never say no to Springsteen. And I was production managing. We got there, it was the week of the AMAs. The AMAs were on early that evening. Lionel was the host and also wrote the song. Quincy came in and put a sign on the door, leave your egos on the door. I was real. In the studio part. There was a second stage that was set up for everybody else. And when I mean everybody else, it was full of people. There was food, there was alcohol. I don't know if there were drugs, I didn't see any. But everybody who was the other invited guests. Dick Clark and his wife Carrie came in after the AMAs. And I ended up spending 99% of my time in the studio, in the lobby of the studio, right outside the door,
Wow.
for hours.
Wow.
I ordered Tommy burgers for all the tall guys. Who was it? Daryl Hall, Huey Lewis, Steve Perry. There were a couple more, like standing around me in a huddle, and I'm taking Tommy burger orders at 3 a.m. because they didn't want to eat the chicken and waffles that Arnold brought in. I heard Ray Charles asked somebody where the bathroom is, and Stevie Wonder volunteered to take him. I heard that. They told Cindy Lauper to take her jewelry off in the room, which she did, but she was still having some. And when she came outside, I went, Cindy, take your jewelry off. We need the rest of it off. And she went, David Lee Roth said it's better to look good than to feel good. I'm leaving it on. And I went, here. And she did. Who else? Everybody was there. I mean, it was a fascinating night. I met Billy Joel's fiance came.
Oh. Who was?
What the hell is her name now? Wasn't Cindy Crawford.
Christy Brinkley.
Christy Brinkley.
Oh,
with a
wow.
rock on her finger. The size of like Montana. It was really an interesting, it was a long night, but it was one of the best things I've ever done in my life.
Yeah, I mean, to be around that many, like, that's a once in a lifetime.
It was
couldn't.
you can't do it again. They tried,
No,
but you
you
really can't do
can't.
it again. And they flew Bob Geldorf in from London so he could talk to them.
Oh.
I don't know whose jet it was. And everybody, it was just a crazy night. And there was a lot going on.
Yeah.
I stayed out of most of the lot going on.
Yeah. You got to in production.
But it was, I mean, I babysat Springsteen as he signed his posters. When they did the Greatest Night in Pop, they interviewed Harriet and they interviewed Larry Klein, which was fantastic to hear because I haven't heard, and I've known Harriet for years, and I knew Larry for years, but Harriet's kids and my kids went to school together, so I've known her for a long time. And it was great to hear the stories that I didn't get to hear, how they prepped it, how Ken Cragen got them in, why they did it on the night they did it, which was obvious.
Yeah.
I mean, the AMAs is in town, you're going to get everybody. But it was probably the best thing I've ever done.
Yeah. Of
Yeah.
course.
And the
Oh.
most tiring thing I've ever done.
How long? How long were you there?
29 hours, 32 hours, I don't know, a long time. Long time.
Back then, those long days were like nowadays. You hit over 10 and everybody's
like
there's
complaining,
a
ready to
revolt.
go
Yeah,
home.
yeah,
No.
they're gone.
No, I'm used to the shooting till 2, 3 a.m. in the
Yeah.
morning. I mean, that's what we used to do.
Yeah, especially musicians.
Especially
You just don't know. Even if you have a call time,
Yeah.
you got to give it a 12-hour swing.
Well, Quincy ran that room beautifully.
Oh, wow.
I mean, he really did. He kept everybody on target and moving, and it wasn't easy because you had a lot of people there, but everybody knew him and respected him, and they listened, and everything got done, which is still amazing to me.
As a production, in a situation like that, knowing that there are artists like Quincy Jones who are in control of creating
Right.
that music, how do you have to respond knowing you're still trying to create and get your content? How do you have to react in those situations?
Nobody. This was a night that was pre-planned the best that they could within 2 weeks, basically. But there wasn't that conversation. He knew what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was doing. He had produced a lot of music for a lot of stuff and a lot of people who were already in the room. And so it was easy. And I was the production manager. I didn't have a lot of responsibility. I did what I was basically told to do, which was the best part, you know. And it was probably one of the most magical things I've ever done. And I've done a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff. But, you know.
Whose line is it anyways?
Yeah.
Changed the way that Americans see improv, even how improv was shot. How and when did you know that was going to be a hit?
When it was on Britain 45 years ago. Those guys have been doing that show since 1970 something or 80. They started at BBC. Dan Patterson, Mark Levison created it. BBC aired it. I forget Clive's last name, but he was the host. And most of the guys were still there. They're still there.
Yeah.
Wayne was added probably about 15 years later.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, I had a conversation with Mark Pedowitz, who became the head of the CW, shortly after we did our first season on the CW. He said it took him over 2 years to negotiate a deal. But he knew when he left ABC, because he put it on ABC, and he put it on Freeform, which I forget the name it was originally, God knows. And then when he moved to CW, he wanted to bring it along. It took him 2 years to negotiate the contract, and he did it, and we did the show again.
We all, the longer we're in this business, get, for maybe lack of a better term, desensitized to fame, celebrity, or anything like that. Has there ever been one, or what's the one that you were just completely starstruck by?
I met Fred Astaire in a doctor's office.
Okay. And what were you doing there?
I was there.
Wait. We got HIPAA violations. Just give me the...
No. I was there early to have something done. And the doctor said to me, oh, you're working at I don't even remember where I was. I might have been at Sony. No, I don't think I was at Sony. He was dead by then. But he said to me, you should meet the person who's in the waiting room, because I see him before he goes to work. And I'm like, or wherever he's going. And I said, who is it? And he said, Fred Astaire. And I went, what? And he opened the door and he introduced me to Fred Astaire. This is Susan. She's starting in the business. Blah, blah. And he was very gracious and very nice. I heard he wasn't always very nice, but he was very gracious and very nice. And he talked to me for like 10 minutes. And I went out of there going, okay, I've met Fred Astaire. Now what do I do?
That's awesome.
Because, the thing about fame is that people don't realize you can have fame forever, or you can have fame for a short period of time. But at the end of the day, you still put your pants on one leg at a time, and everybody pees. Yeah. So, and everybody has issues and hardships, and you got to discount some of that stuff.
Yep. Do you have one moment that you look back on that you go, that changed the trajectory of what you were doing in this business?
No.
No, you always knew that trajectory?
I knew where I wanted to eventually go. Being a studio exec was not in the cards. My desire was to be a producer on sitcoms. Mm. Well, I did a bunch of them. So I did Blossom, the first season. I did the second season of Different World. I did 2 seasons of Foxworthy. I did the Fresh Beat Band for Nickelodeon.
Oh, wow.
What else did I do? With Compact, I did Alice and Bosom Buddies. Mm. And a couple of very crazy pilots. One with Sally Struthers that went till like 3 or 4 in the morning as a pilot. It was a little crazy.
What were pilots like to shoot back then? Because nowadays they don't really shoot pilots anymore.
No, they give you like a 6-episode arc and cross their fingers.
Yeah. What was it like back then, and what were the pressures like to have to shoot something that everything was riding on?
Well, for me, it was a job.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to, like, I shot the pilot for Just Shoot Me.
Okay.
And I was working with Levitan and his crew, which was great. And I was the AP, I wasn't the producer. So I handled the crewing and I handled everything else. And we had an actress whose mother was a rock star. And we were all looking forward to meeting the rock star, and they fired her before they shot the pilot. And then later on, they brought in David Spade. He wasn't in the pilot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, yeah, that was his big breakout show, too, wasn't it?
Yeah.
In New York City.
Yeah. No, they shot it here.
They shot it here?
Oh, yeah.
Was it based in New York City or something?
Yes.
What was it? That's what it was.
Yes.
That's what it was.
Wendy Malick was amazing. George Siegel was amazing.
Yeah.
The woman who was the lead was amazing. But this poor little thing was ready to do this show. And
So you said that one of the shows you did, or the pilots were Foxworthy.
Yep.
Tell me about Jeff Foxworthy.
Jeff is the nicest man in America. He and Donny Osmond, and I've worked with both of them, are the 2 nicest men in America. Bill Engvall is a close second.
What was he? Again, just a good guy on the show.
He was just generous and lovely and warm and fabulous, and took care of his crew and took care of his co-stars, and really, really was, he was a mensch.
What's an example of, we always hear stories, and the news always tries to cover stories where talent is, this or stuff. What's it like to work with somebody like that? And what's an example of how he brings something really great to the set and that great camaraderie or energy?
Jeff is just a really good guy,
Yeah.
and he knows everybody's names. He pays attention to what's going on. He never throws a tantrum. If he gets mad at something, you don't see it.
Yeah.
Whatever's happening behind the scenes with the people he wanted to fix something with happens behind the scenes. It never comes to set,
Got it.
which is the best.
Yeah.
It's how you kind of want things to work. You want people to think you're fun to work with, and then they come. We had Terry Bradshaw on the show, and the guys wanted to throw a football around with him, and I brought my son as an extra, and he brought some Nerf balls for Terry to sign, and he asked Terry while he was signing the Nerf balls if he'd play football with them at lunch, and Jeff and Bill went, and then he did,
Oh, wow.
and Jeff and Bill had the best time, and the rest of the cast too, but I spent more time with them I spent a lot of time with Bill. Bill and his wife are lovely, and Jeff and his wife are lovely. They're like just really nice people.
That's
It's just
great.
a pleasure.
Oh, that's great. You've held leadership roles at the Television Academy.
Yeah.
How have those experiences shaped your view?
Well, Television Academy has been there for a long time. And when I came in as a governor, I don't even know where I was. I was probably on, I think 2006 I started as governor. So I don't even know what show I was on, God knows. But I learned a lot about all the different peer groups, because when I started, there were 29 peer groups, 26 or 29 peer groups. Now there are 33.
Okay.
The choreographers added a peer group. There's now emerging media, whatever that means, and there are a couple of others that have developed. But it's a great place to meet people from all different areas of what you do.
Okay.
And get to know them. I've hired a lot of assistants and PAs from some of the mixers that I've done at the Academy, because you meet somebody and they used to have, I don't know if they do anymore, they used to have something called associate memberships, so that when you were a student you could join. Well, they have associate members, but when you were a student they had student memberships, and you could join as a student, and then as your career progressed you became an associate, and then you became a full-fledged member. It's all about voting in that respect. And so I'd meet a lot of the student members or the new associate members, and some of them were impressive, so give them a card and tell them to call me, and I'd hire them.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean,
Nice.
but that paying it forward is always the point. And I think the Academy serves a really good purpose. I think it brings people together. It does a lot of educational things, both for college kids and high school kids, and for our own industry, because they're now doing an AI thing with different things where I have no idea what the hell you do with AI. I mean, what do I know? And they did a couple of different workshops, which is very helpful. You learn what you need to know, or at least something
Yep.
about what you need to know.
Yep.
But I've found it very helpful for networking. I found it very helpful for also answers to things. When I was at Sony in the beginning, I knew all the production executives because I had interviewed with all of them. And I used to go to lunch with them. And so if I needed an answer on something, like if I needed to do a budget on a show that was similar to Survivor, I knew who to call. If I needed to do a game show budget that was something out of my realm, somebody else had done it, I knew who to call to ask questions. And that's part of the Academy experience too.
Is there a piece of advice that you received in your career that you pass along to others?
Not to take anything really personally when you're working. Because if you take it personally, where does that get you? How does that help you? Business is business.
Yeah.
And sometimes I used to fight with my closest friends about stuff because I might be wrong, they might be wrong, but, but at the end of the day, we're still colleagues and we're still friends.
Nice.
So,
Nice.
and the do unto others is a good
Yeah.
motto too. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Yeah.
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 The way that we're going, do you think television, obviously television as we know it is no longer the same, but do you think television will exist in any sort of cable form,
Yes.
or will it all be streamers?
I think television will always exist because people who live in the middle of the country can't afford 37 different cable channels, number one, can't afford to buy what's on their phones all the time. And I think that television will stay. It will morph again. I wish they get rid of half the news channels, but that's okay. Maybe all the news channels for a long time, because I won't watch news anymore. I can't. It makes me too crazy. But I think that television as we know it will be different, but I don't think it'll completely go away. It'll get disrupted again and again and again, like it has been, and I think the internet is there. But if you live in the middle of Kansas, and you're working a 9 to 5 job or whatever, and you come home, you're not going to be looking at your phone every 5 minutes to find something to watch. You're going to turn on the box and sit back and have a beer and watch something. Whether it's a cable channel or a network channel, we'll see. But I don't think the whole thing will go away.
Got it.
I just don't see it. I don't see how people who don't make money to pay for it all, and not that they're poor, but even if they're, okay, they're not going to spend their money on that. They'll spend their money on going to Las Vegas, or they'll spend their money on going to Florida, or, going to the movies maybe even still.
Yep.
I just don't know. I don't have a sense that it's going to completely die.
Okay.
It's a free medium.
Yeah.
And they're still getting advertising. I mean, they're making advertising money.
AM radio still exists. They
AM
still
radio
advertising
still
on that.
exists,
You know what I
see?
mean? Yeah.
So I think it's still, I just think it may, what they're doing now is they're taking the Paramount Plus and they're putting it on CBS, and then they're putting CBS on Paramount Plus, and Peacock is doing the same thing,
Yeah.
even though they have some, and ABC is doing the same thing with Hulu. So I think that the feasibility of this is that it will become shared more, and I don't think it'll go away completely.
This is
It'll never
interesting
be
to
what
me.
it was, though.
This is interesting to me now, just going through your timelines and putting some stuff together. So when you started off, and we were talking about this stuff, the sitcoms and things that we're talking about the big three and Fox kicking around.
Right.
So that means you were right there when it blew up from, I guess, Don Henley's song to all the 100 TV stations with nothing on them.
Yeah.
What was it like when that complete surge of cable channels opened up? What was that like?
Everybody had something they wanted to do.
Was it the golden time, or did you feel like it was the flood and this could be
No.
bad?
We didn't notice the cable channels as much if we were working,
Okay.
we knew they were there, but they were also there for syndication purposes. Syndication was a huge market. You could make a ton of money.
Seinfeld.
Like Seinfeld is still making a ton of money. Friends is making a ton of
Oh,
money.
yeah.
The Neighborhood is now syndicated. So that hasn't completely gone away. But I always feel like I got lucky because I worked in an age where there were 3-4 networks plus cable,
Yeah.
and everybody wanted to do something. And, you had MTV. I mean, I have friends who started at MTV
Yeah.
the first day, MTV became something entirely different as it transpired, and then VH1 went away, basically.
That was my first job in television, VH1.
See?
When they were all doing like 40 greatest feuds, 40 greatest celebrity hair bands.
But is it there anymore?
No, thank God.
So I feel very lucky because I got to experience stuff like Brandon Tartikoff was around, and it was an amazing time. First of all, you could get on the lots without being part of the lot. You'd come with an envelope with somebody's name on it who was on the lot. Jerry Weintraub. He was at Warner Brothers. And you'd come with the envelope and you'd ride up to the gate and you say, I have a delivery for Jerry Weintraub. And they didn't have any way to check. So they'd give you a badge and they'd tell you where to park and where his office is, and you'd go on the lot. Now, they never checked how long you were on the lot for, even though there was a little sticker in your car. you could wander around forever and go into offices and meet people. And that's how Spielberg got his office at Universal. He figured out a way to get on the lot, and then somehow or another, this is the story. I don't know if it's 100% true.
Yeah.
But he figured out how to get on the lot, and he found an empty office, and he set himself up, and then he had an office at Universal. It's a story. I don't know if it's true.
When those cable networks were all starting to open up, you mentioned MTV
Yep.
and VH1. What was there one that you when the description came through, you were like, "What are you opening up?" Like MTV, when you first pitch it, is like, "Wait, you're doing what?"
Yeah.
Was there anything like that where it just was like,
I think
can't believe we're
there
doing
was
that.
like time, and I don't even remember.
Did you think MTV would be successful when it first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you could visually see the artist. You know, when you're listening to them on radio, you don't know what they look like. They could look like, Punky Brewster, or, some guy who's 120 years old sitting behind a drum set. Oh, that's now.
Yeah, exactly. But it also went the other way. Like, you talk to somebody like a Billy Squier, and he'll say videos killed his career completely. He was the biggest guy in the world, and then he did that video with him dancing around that room, and that was the end of that.
Think of the DJs, the video
Oh,
DJs.
yeah, yeah,
Who
yeah.
are still on the air, by the way.
Yeah.
On Sirius.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember even that's when the Howard Stern all flipped over and all of that.
Well, Howard Stern got discovered and ended up on E first.
Yes, that's right. That's when that first.
And there's a book by a guy named Larry Namer, and he was the guy who helped start E.
That was their other big one that pushed them through was that Kinnear Talk Soup, right?
Talk Soup was the first show they created for E.
Yeah.
And it made Greg Kinnear's career.
Yeah.
And then there were follow-ups. I think Aisha was on that for some reason. I don't know. I may be wrong. And it was fun.
Yeah. What of all those shows back then? What's one again? Not the We Are the World. What are those shows? Or those things? What one are you most proud of? Going, wow, I was on that one. That was kind of cool.
Well, Bosom Buddies was fun. And it was actually, it was unusual for its time, because two men lived in a women's hotel. So they had to dress as women when they came home at night, and then went to work in suits.
How was that in that time period? How was dealing
Everybody
with that?
accepted it. It was interesting. Nobody seemed to care.
I remember watching it as a
boycotted.
kid. Yeah, I remember watching it as a kid.
And we had Holland Taylor, who was phenomenal.
She's incredible.
Yeah, Wendy.
Wasn't she just in Billions, right? Recently. She's so good.
She's like 100 years old.
Right? She's
she
so
looks
awesome.
fabulous.
I know, she's awesome.
But she was sort of the linchpin, because she was the adult. And then in the hotel you had Donna Dixon, who then married Dan Aykroyd. And the woman who was in Dawn, from Tony Orlando and Dawn, whose name I cannot remember now. And Wendy Jo Sperber.
Wendy Jo Sperber.
Passed away.
Yeah.
Cancer. But it was a nice little group of people.
Wow.
And it was fun. That was my compact experience. That was fun.
Yeah.
We got to do so many really weird things just because we were the first ones and we were the only ones.
Yeah.
So, and then Nancy went on vacation one week and I overbooked us and she got really upset. But it's okay.
Susan, I want to thank you for coming in
Sure.
today. I appreciate it. Thank you so much
Of
for
course.
being here. Did you have
This was
fun
fun.
today?